And welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. It's been more than 8 years since the Houthis overthrew the legitimate government of Yemen and caused a war which has led to the death of hundreds of thousands of people and one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. On this episode of Frankly Speaking, we hear from Osama Al-Gosaibi, the Managing Director of Project Masam, a Saudi initiative tasked with removing the hundreds of thousands of deadly landmines in Yemen planted by the Houthis. We ask if peace talks are properly addressing the issue of landmines and question whether Yemen can ever fully recover from the debilitating landmine crisis that extends far beyond mere physical injuries. Mr. Al-Gosaibi, thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. Now, on the 10th of March this year, Iran and Saudi Arabia signed what's been called a historic peace deal that was brokered by China. Since then, we've seen an ongoing ceasefire. We've seen more peace talks take place as well. But frankly speaking, have you seen any impact of this deal putting further pressure on the Houthis facilitating the work that you do in demining Yemen?
I appreciate that Iran and Saudi Arabia have reached that accord. I think in the long run, it should help the whole area and should reshape some of the relationship that exists in this area. How is that impacting mine action in Yemen? I don't think we have seen any improvement on the issue of landmines in Yemen yet. Al-Houthi have signed like the Stockholm Agreement in regard to Yemen. It's in black and white in there. They're required to hand over maps, information, locations, description of what have been planted in Yemen. That has not happened to date. So as far as our work is concerned, I have not seen any improvement.
Okay, so you were saying that despite the improved diplomatic relations between Saudi and Iran, despite the ongoing peace talks, you were saying the Houthis still refuse to hand over any details of where they have planted the mines in Yemen. Is that the case?
That is the case. Al-Houthi have information. We know he has information. There's two types of mines that are being planted in Yemen by Al-Houthi. What we call is random minefields, small minefields, 4 or 5 mines here and there. I doubt those have any information on them. But we have worked on massive, huge minefields in the West Coast, in Shabwa. Those are military-style laid minefields. That means someone out there have that information because it's done properly with pattern, with grid references, with movements. No. Those for sure have, or someone has, that map and they get references to those minefields. We have not seen any of that. In the past, now my 6th year in Yemen, I have not seen one document in regard to what the Houthi have planted in Yemen.
And I think a military zone as well is so different to a civilian zone as well. Do you think that there's anything that Iran, China, or indeed even the international community to do in order to put pressure on the Houthis to hand over these maps? Because surely this should be separate to a political issue when we consider that these landmines are predominantly targeting civilians, often women and young children.
Project Masam works in what is called the liberated areas. So they're not under Houthi control areas anymore. In some areas that we've worked in, example, Al-Jof, Shabwa, some of those areas are being cleared now for the 3rd time.
Wow.
Why? Because over the past few years, there have been movements between Al-Houthi and the legitimate government in Yemen. So there's a shift on the fronts over there. Shabwa, we nearly declared it free of mines. We've worked there 3 years, plenty of teams, hard work, and we were about to declare it absolutely clear of mines. Wow. When Al-Houthi went into Shabwa, And before he was kicked out again, the mines we have found during the time he was there is even more than what we have cleared in the past 3 years of us working over there. Bigger mines, newer technology, more damage.
It feels like an impossible scenario to be facing. How many mines have you cleared so far? My estimates put it at about 500,000. Is that accurate? And how long has it taken you so far?
We have cleared over 400,000 items. Now that includes mines, both anti-personnel and anti-tank. That includes a huge number of UXOs, unexploded ordnance, and an even huger number of improvised explosive devices. I will stop at improvised explosive devices. When you talk about Project Masam have cleared to date over 7,800 improvised devices, such as rock mines in Yemen. This number did not exist anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
This is, and this is just talking us. This is not taking into account what the Yemeni engineers have cleared, what the coalition have cleared, what other players in Yemen have cleared. This is only Masam. This number is mind-boggling. This has never happened anywhere else in the world.
Wow, so even we're looking at figures that are, potentially even higher than what we saw back in the Second World War. And if this is accurate, how many mines would you estimate still exist in Yemen today?
I would say anywhere between 1 and 2 million mines.
Wow.
This is newly laid mines. I'm not taking into account mines that existed in Yemen prior to the Houthi problem. Mine Action Program in Yemen have been working for the past 15 years on removing mines. Yemen is a signatory to the Mine Ban Treaty.
Yeah.
But then here I have a comment about the Mine Ban Treaty. The Mine Ban Treaty talks about anti-personnel mines. They don't refer to anti-tank mines. They don't refer to explosive devices such as rock mines. So the terminology is very shady in there. So you're obligated to remove anti-personnel mines. But as a country, you're not obligated to remove any anti-tank, or the IEDs that you're finding. The Houthi took the anti-tank mine, improvised them, attached them to pressure plates to reduce the weight of an anti-tank mine to make it similar to anti-personnel mine. So instead of you having an anti-tank that would explode at a weight of about over 120 or over 150 kilograms, he've reduced it to less than 10 kilograms. That if a child walks over those pressure plates, you won't find anything left of him. So you could imagine what would happen to a human if an anti-tank mine explodes next to him. But the problem is, to this date, these improvised mines, the improvised IEDs, are not within the international community terminology. They have not found a terminology for it. They have not come up with any rules or regulation that talks about them.
So you feel there's obviously a loophole when it comes to legislation. Even if the legislation was tightened, though, do you think the Houthi rebels are likely to adhere to it, given what we know so far?
Probably not. But at least it will give the Western world an excuse to put more pressure on them.
I wanted to ask you, how many victims would you estimate so far have been killed as a result of these deadly landmines? And if I can ask if you have lost any of your colleagues in fighting this noble mission?
In Yemen, it's in the tens of thousands. There's another problem in Yemen. There's not one entity in Yemen that have taken it upon themselves to collect all the information of all the victims in Yemen and document them. So if you come to Ma'rib, then you have one organization that's doing Ma'rib victims, then another one doing Taiz, then another one doing Aden, then another one doing Al-Jawf. But there's not one entity, not even a government entity, that have taken the time or the effort to collect and document all those incidents.
What would you estimate, though, in terms of your work, in terms of what you have seen? And as I said before, have you lost any of your colleagues? You've been there since mid-2018.
I would say in the thousands of victims in Yemen. As far as Project Masam, we have lost 30 of our comrades in Yemen, 47 injured, 30 fatalities. Some of them are extremely close friends that I've worked with for the past 18 years. So yes, we paid a high price in Yemen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Please do accept our condolences. It is such a tragic situation, and it feels like the figures are quite overwhelming, because from what I understand, you have around 550 team members. But if you look at the sheer size of Yemen, the territory is more than 550,000 square kilometres. So from my understanding, that would mean every team member of yours is responsible for clearing around 1,000 square kilometres of land. Is that accurate? Do you have enough resources, particularly when you're talking about having to clear an area 3 times and a Houthi rebel still comes back and causes further destruction?
Project Masam have 32 teams on the ground that are spread between our Ma'rib HQ and our Aden HQ, covering both areas. Is that number enough? No, it's not enough. But don't forget, there are other players in the market. The Yemeni Mine Action Center have also another 32 teams that are being sponsored by UN agencies. We don't interact with each other. Each group works totally separate from the other. There are other NGOs that are trying to work in Yemen today, also being financed by the UN, but they're a much smaller organization. They don't have enough the teams like Masam has. Are they doing an impact? I hope they do, because Yemen is in bad need of solving this issue. Yemeni society is there's a stigma that's always associated with mine accidents in Yemen. You have women who've got divorced because they've lost a limb, a man who've lost the ability to support a family of 7 or 8 because of a mine accident. The UN announced last week that more than half of the accidents that happen to children in Yemen are directly related to mines. That's a huge number. Mines affect the education system, the medical system, water supplies, farmland, grazed land. We have cleared mines in schools, in Taz, where half the school was destroyed when the Houthi moved out. We went in, we were able to remove the rebels. We have found a lot of mines in there, cleared around the school. That school accommodates 600 students who, before we went there, they were actually studying outside the school in an open area. We have cleared in just south of Hodeidah a school where we have found the flooring of the school was removed. IEDs were planted under the flooring of those schools, and then they were covered again.
Wow.
If students went back to the school, the whole school would have blown up.
And I think that's one of the big issues, because we're seeing Houthi rebels plant these landmines in schools. We're seeing them put them in the rock mines you mentioned, even in ovens, if families come back and try and create a home once more. What hope do these civilians have? So I'd be interested to understand, how much does it cost to actually create and plant a landmine as opposed to removing it? And I'm talking about the pure financials here, not the cost of human life.
To plant a mine is cheap. You're taking tens of dollars.
Wow.
UN estimates in clearing mines, each mine could cost anywhere between $500 to $1,000 to clear it.
Wow.
So there is no comparison between the cost of actually planting it and clearing it. 2, Al-Houthi today is using locally manufactured mines. He's not importing mines. He's had assistance in creating his own factories, let's say. He's doing anti-tank mines in different sizes, anti-personnel mines that are larger than any anti-personnel mine that existed in the world before. He is doing improvised explosive devices such as rock mines. He have also come up with mines that were actually booby-trapped. So you're not only attacking civilians, now you're creating a problem to the person who's going to come and actually try to remove it. So you're attacking mine action personnel. You're attacking teams that are on the ground. They are the target now. You've created jumping mines. The whole purpose of them is not to maim. It's actually just to kill, and to kill as many as possible. Anti-personnel mines originally were created during the World War I and II is to maim, not to kill. Because at that time, movement of mass armies, they don't want that person to die. Because when one person gets injured, that would take 4, 5, 6 people to stay behind the lines to assist that injured person. Today, anti-personnel mines created by Al-Houthi in Yemen are deadly. The purpose of them is not to injure. The purpose of them is to kill. When you're talking about the jumping mines that we found on the West Coast, those are deadly. Those are 360-degree directional jumping mines. That means anybody within the vicinity of those will be killed.
And obviously very deliberate choices by the Houthis as well. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your work. From what I understand, it is fully Saudi funded. Do you have any other countries, major countries or members of the coalition or UK, US or EU, do they contribute to your work in removing landmines in Yemen at all?
Project Masam is 100% Saudi funded, 100% Saudi managed and executed. Yes, we have collaboration with a UK-based company that I have been working with for the past 20 years. We have expats from South Africa, from UK. All our teams, I have Saudi experts who are working with me on my team. All our demining teams are Yemeni teams. Yemeni teams that we actually took from the Yemeni mine action program. We've retrained them, re-equipped them, and basically we are the mentors and the supervision on those teams. In the long run, it's the Yemenis that are going to stay in Yemen and continue working in Yemen. I don't know how long Project Masam will continue. I mean, we started year 1, and it was a 1-year contract. Now we're into year 6. Wow. That's a Saudi government decision. That's not mine. So I have no idea how long. But at least if we do leave Yemen today, we have trained, highly trained, enough Yemenis to continue with the work over there.
And a lot of work still to go. You were saying more than 1 million mines you estimate are still left. But I want to pick up on what you said. It's obviously Saudi-backed. You've also retrained Yemenis to help with the land removal. But are you also saying that countries like the US, like the UK, like the EU, who continue to issue statements about concerns about human rights, about the ongoing crisis and war in Yemen, they issue these statements, yet they're not prepared to contribute financially in removing these deadly landmines in any way? And why is that?
The UN have contributed through the UNDP program.
Sure, but I'm talking about these specific individual countries.
But then now, I think the situation is changing. I think UNDP is going through some sort of a switch as far as Yemen is concerned. There's a new policy the UN is planning to adopt in Yemen. We don't have the details of that new policy in Yemen. They would like to get the involvement of other organizations to be involved in Yemen, financed by either UN or Western Europe or whatever other organization or country. But it's still vague. I mean, we don't have any details of how far they will go.
Well, it seems like funding has dipped so much at the moment. We've seen UK funding to Yemen in recent years. That's more than half. In fact, the government also admitted no impact assessment was done into the impact of the reduction of aid in Yemen. We've seen EU drastically cut their funding, US as well. Does that concern you at all? Why do you think these major players who continue to issue these big statements, sweeping statements about being concerned about the crisis in Yemen, why do you think we're seeing a lot of lip service but not action when we see people like you risk their lives every day to try and save others?
Let me be, well, your program is frankly speaking, so let me be a little bit more frank. I don't believe in holding the stick from the middle. Okay? I don't see the benefit of supporting a Sana'a-based mine action program when we know that Al-Houthi is behind planting, manufacturing all those mines and IEDs in Yemen. The UN have this policy of that we need to hold the stick from the middle. So yeah, we need to support Sana'a, we need to support Aden and Ma'rib.
Do you think that's working, that policy?
Well, according to them, they're supposed to be neutral.
What about according to you? Someone who's on the ground there every day.
I think it's a waste of time and money. If you want to assist Yemenis, I don't care who they are, who they belong to, North, South, Houthi, non-Houthi. I'm talking about if you want to assist the local population, there are proper ways of doing it. You can supervise proper mine action demining teams under Al-Houthi control areas, under your supervision, like we are doing in our areas. We have a very close working relationship with the Yemeni Mine Action Program, and it's working. You know, you should do over there. You know, that's if you actually want to clear mines, not only pay and talk about, oh, we have funded this and we funded that. Where's the money is going? I have not seen. Masam is the only project or entity in Yemen that announces their figures every Sunday morning. And those figures have been reviewed, rectified, notarized, you name it, whatever, by the Yemen Mine Action Center, by our own operational team, before they are published every Sunday morning. Regardless of the figures, high or low, we publish them every Sunday morning on all our websites, on all social media, with the details, how many APs, how many anti-tanks, IEDs, UXO, square meterage. We announce it.
Would you question other agencies' figures, though? Would you question other agencies' figures in that case? Why do you think there is a lack of transparency with other groups working on the ground there?
I've always wanted to know what they have done. We don't have access to it. I know one organization, I'm not going to name it here because I don't think it's fair to name them, where they have announced their figures in tonnage. Now, I would not announce Masam's figures in tonnage. I would announce it in numbers. Impact has nothing to do with weight or number. Impact of mine action is what have you done to the local population in the area. Masam took it upon themselves from day one to actually work in high impact areas. We were interested in getting the displaced back to their villages, farmers to go back and farm their land, students to go back to their schools, water supplies are accessible, desert roads that people use are cleared, grazing land is cleared. Those are the high impact areas. You could remove one mine from a farmland, but then you have affected the whole community, have benefited from you removing that one mine. You could go and remove hundreds of tons of unexploded ordnance from somewhere out in the desert, but that's no impact.
Okay, so when we talk about these mines, where are the Houthis getting the materials, the knowledge and the know-how in order to develop them? Is it all Iranian supplied?
I would say they come out from outside Yemen. I cannot say it's Iran.
Whereabouts would you say then? Some from Iran, some from other locations?
Probably. I mean, we have technically taken apart every single thing we have found in Yemen for our own purpose. Why? So at least we know how to deal with them. You know, IEDs, rock mines, you know, I have a technical team. That's their job, is just to dismantle everything we find, and then we specify. But then, okay, when I get a rock mine, then I found in the rock mine that there is 1, 2, 3 items inside that rock mine that there's no way in the world those were manufactured in Yemen.
So if you were going to hazard a guess, if they're coming from outside Yemen, where would you expect they are coming from?
Look who's financing them.
So Iran?
I would say Iran or any other entity that's supporting them.
And who would you say that is predominantly in your expertise?
Well, we know the chain is coming financed by Iran, even though they're coming from some other countries. Mm-hmm. Drones in Yemen had German-made engines in them. Who's going to get German-made engines smuggled into Yemen? It cannot be a small organization. It has to be a proper government who has a lot of, hands around the areas who can get that smuggled into Yemen.
So who are you accusing of working together then to be able to smuggle these goods into Yemen?
Other than Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're going to be a big question mark there.
Okay. Now, your mandate was recently extended for the 6th year in a row. You've also received a special medal of bravery from the Yemeni President Rashad Al-Alimi. So clearly there's a lot of trust and appreciation for the work that you are doing. But when do you think we can get to the stage where you say mission accomplished?
I can only say that if there's an absolute proper truce in Yemen and all the fronts are open and we are working there, then you could give an estimate. No one knows what's on those fronts at the moment, since we're not working on an active front. I mean, all those numbers have been cleared from previously controlled Houthi areas and they're liberated now. Whether it's starting in Al-Jawf, ending up in south of Hodeidah, So that means there are a lot of areas we have not even entered or seen what's in it. And I would imagine the numbers are huge in those areas. I think it will take years and years to come, and it will take a lot more number of teams to try and clear those areas.
Can you envision a day where the Houthis ever do hand over a map to you, clearly showing where these landmines have been planted? And if that doesn't happen, what kind of scenario are we looking at?
It will just delay the problem, increase the number of victims, increase the number of mine action personnel over the years to come.
And do you think we're looking at years or decades?
If you have proper funding, proper number of teams, and proper information.
That's a big if.
Yeah. I would give it another 10 years.
At least. Well, Mr. Al-Gosaibi, thank you very much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. We appreciate your insights and wish you the best of luck in continuing to carry out your important work in Yemen.
Thank you very much for having me here.